organizations are spending on MarTech, and in some cases realizing only a fraction of the utility of that MarTech, just because it's complicated, or, they were sold this vision of what it could do. And, without the right expertise in-house or the right further investment after buying it, there's all sorts of things that go into figuring out how to drive value with your marketing dollars.
I'm Aaron Burnett, host of the Digital Clinic, and on today's episode, we're doing something a little different. Today, I get to sit down with Paul Weinstein, who's president of Wheelhouse Digital Marketing Group, the agency that sponsors this podcast, to talk with him about a big project he's been working on, a series of HIPAA-compliant MarTech guides that will help readers to understand the MarTech landscape for privacy-first industries, the categories in which they may need to invest, and even more important, to understand the vendor landscape for each of those categories. What are the top 10 vendors? What criteria should you be using to select and evaluate those vendors? And what's our perspective, given our more than a dozen years experience in performance marketing for privacy-first industries, with each of those solutions, and what do we recommend? I hope that you'll enjoy this episode of the Digital Clinic. The level of complexity, the number of regulations, the number of regulatory bodies, the governing authorities that are focused on privacy regulations continues to, I think blossom is the wrong word, but grow. You have all the federal regulations that come from HHS and OCR guidance that are still largely enforced. You have FTC enforcement actions. You have states coming online with their own versions of privacy regulations, some of which acknowledge and carve out HIPAA, some of which don't at all, are silent on it, and so are in conflict. Some of them are more restrictive than federal regulations, like California and in some ways Washington State. And you have international regulations with GDPR and recent court rulings that make some aspects of GDPR even more stringent than they previously were thought to be. And then, as if that weren't enough, you have antitrust rulings against Google in particular. And you have platform changes with Google, Meta, and others that take data away from advertisers and agencies. So it's a simple landscape.
It's very straightforward. Yes.
Very straightforward. Into this simple landscape, tell me what's the state of play for MarTech, for the options that agencies and clients should be thinking about as they seek to navigate all of this and not run afoul of the law and the lawyers and their patients and customers.
Well, businesses have been investing in MarTech for a long time. Since the beginning of SaaS, we've been investing in Salesforce and CRMs, and then buying ads on Google. And, we've been doing all kinds of things to drive marketing performance, to drive business outcomes. And as we've been doing this, we've been accumulating MarTech. We've been connecting it together. We've kind of been building our MarTech stacks. And then along the way, having to navigate just all the changes that have come along of all sorts, privacy just being one of them. The stakes are getting higher and more clear, and then more complicated at the same time. It's just, sometimes it's not really clear whether or not, do I have to do this? Is this recommended for me to do this? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I not?
Right.
What I think is most important is that organizations really have to, no matter what posture they take, what problem they're trying to solve, they need control over the data that they're collecting, how they're collecting it, how they're using it, how they're sharing it, their ability to get more value from it. In today's age, and this is even more true with AI, the value is in the data that you're collecting and your ability to leverage it, but also the risk is there too, right? So it's become important to both be very adept in understanding how to both collect, but also keep the data private, and then also figure out how to leverage and activate and optimize against and continue to drive business outcomes with that same data. So what it means is you need tools and platforms and MarTech to be able to manage all the different aspects of what that means, from the very start of just asking for consent, right? All the way through to the activation and building of audiences you
And
know,
tracking
yeah,
performance.
and then tracking
Yeah.
performance and being able to figure out, did this work or not? The level of difficulty on that part has just kept going up.
Yeah.
It's complicated, or they were sold this vision of what it could do, and without the right expertise in house or the right further investment after buying it, there's all sorts of things that go into figuring out how to drive value with your marketing dollars, right? And it's not getting simpler.
No. Well, and as you said, in some instances, existing MarTech providers have evolved so that they have the right or most of the right privacy controls
Yep.
incorporated into their platform if you configure it in the right way, and often if you combine it with other things.
Yes.
And in some instances, MarTech providers have not provided those privacy controls, either because they've said we're not focused on privacy first industries. We'll stick with e-commerce and
Yep.
these other sort of more standard lead generation or more vanilla web applications. And so part of the science here, part of the art is coming up with a diagnostic that enables folks to figure out what they have, what they should be looking for,
Yeah.
how it might fit together,
Sure.
what the ingredients are
Yeah.
for a MarTech stack that actually is privacy compliant, HIPAA compliant. And so that leads us to this guide that you've created.
Yep.
So tell us about what's in the guide, how we went about putting it together, what its utility is.
So what we have done is basically gone through and categorized all the different types of MarTech utility that is required to for an organization to be able to safely collect data from their website and then turn around and activate it and use it for advertising purposes. And so depending on an organization's size, the type of market they're going after, their complexity, where they're at in a maturity curve, we came up with a dozen different just categories themselves of MarTech. The way that we organized it or thought about it was we started at the start. We started at the beginning, which is just consent, right? Like that's just the first step in the process. And then worked our way through kind of what has to happen next or how you kind of build each successive step. And so we went from consent management platforms to then the cloud infrastructure that you might use to collect data or host certain tools, then into tag management, and then into server-side analytics platforms. And then from there, talking about the actual visualization and reporting tools that are out there. Then we started thinking about, okay, monitoring. We have to monitor our infrastructure to make sure that we're not accidentally leaking any data or that, some rogue pixel hasn't been thrown into some blog post somewhere on the website. So we looked at monitoring. Then we started getting into CDPs, right? We're trying to unify all these different identities across all the different touch points of a website. And then we got into marketing automation and CRM. And then from there went into clean rooms, which is a little more advanced, and then started getting into ad activation, data providers, and then service providers that are kind of focused on this space. We basically went through and we were looking for vendors and platforms that had a demonstrated kind of capability around privacy and compliance, would either sign a BAA or could be configured in a way that you didn't need to sign a BAA with them because you weren't sending them any PHI or things like that, right? And so we looked at it. We did look at this definitely from a HIPAA compliance lens predominantly, but this still applies equally well to any kind of industry or vertical that's focused on privacy and compliance. I looked for platforms and vendors that are also kind of on the figuring out how to activate and drive value. Really, the work, what we're really trying to do is, safely advertise, build our businesses and find new patients and all of that.
Right.
Once we had settled on the 12 categories, within each category, we then went out and looked for every vendor we could find that satisfied both mostly the compliance needs, because typically they're in the category because they satisfy the utility of that category. We want to be able to help marketers understand the utility of each category. Okay, this is what this category is meant to do. These are the vendors that deliver on that, and in ways that maybe some of them do and some of them don't, or what you have to be careful of if you're going to use this vendor, right? And configure it in this way, and really provide a really clear guide for marketers to be able to, okay, know all the vendors that are in this space, their pros and cons when it comes to both compliance and driving performance. Give somebody step by step, okay, start here, move here. Along the way, we're interviewing our own experts, industry experts that we have relationships with, the vendors themselves we're interviewing as well, kind of get their perspective on kind of what makes them special in the category, where the category is going, what they're thinking about, what their roadmaps are, but just provide as much depth and detail and color into each as we can.
We wanted to create kind of a rubric, each of the vendors within each category.
Yep.
Here are the must-haves.
Yeah.
Here are the things that would be very good to have, but if you did it in this particular way, maybe you don't have to.
Yeah.
And here's how to evaluate each of these vendors.
Yeah.
In this initial guide, I know that we tried to remain neutral. In one sense, we captured the top 10 in each category, but we didn't rank them. We're going a little deeper in each of the categories, where we're also being a little more critical and prescriptive. Tell me about that.
The way that this whole process started is we've already published what we're calling our foundational guide. It's got a high level description of each category, and then it lists the vendors and in each that are eventually going to show up in what we're calling the ultimate guide for each respective category. So for the ultimate guide for consent management platforms, we're going to go a level deeper into evaluating each of the vendors that we have and provide, like you said, a scoring rubric as to, how we think that this one meets this particular criteria versus another criteria. It's mostly focused again on basically the two axes is, the compliance and, do they sign a BAA? Yes.
Sure.
Do they have healthcare clients, right? Do they already have a demonstrated kind of ability to meet the needs of this particular industry? Then you get into things like maybe some more qualitative aspects of, usability, extensibility, service level, those kinds of things. And we attempt to kind of grade all of the vendors and give our point of view on them in that way, as well as we do have a point of view on each category in terms of things to look out for and things that have tripped us up in the past and that we've had to figure out. And hopefully we've got some things in each of these guides.
I think one of the reasons I was very enthusiastic about this project is that we do have an interesting perspective right now, born of our own experience of going through this process. The fear that most marketers have, and honestly, that we had a bit that we were nervous about, is that when you go into a fully compliant environment, by definition, you're losing fidelity around the data that was always there from third parties. The easy data. The, hey, just define an audience in my platform and go get them. Well, you can't do that anymore. Hey, just track your performance. We'll give you all the information. You can't do that anymore because you can't share and track in the same way. And the worry was, okay, you lose performance if you lose fidelity around data. But our experience is the opposite. If you collect the right data and you use it in the right way, it forces a discipline through which you have to then concentrate on the actual, what's really important, the moment of delivery of business value, as opposed to what third parties provide, which is at least a couple of levels above. It's an abstraction. It's away from value. Okay, you generated a lead. Okay, this thing happened, but was it really the valuable thing? In healthcare and medtech, usually it's not. It's a level or two removed. And so because we have our own data warehouse, because of some very intelligent things we've been able to do as we learned, we found that the performance that we're driving with the recipe that we have around MarTech is exceptional. It is significantly better than what we drove when we were operating using third-party tracking and targeting. We have a lot that we have learned to share in these guides about how to do this in a way that unlocks performance, doesn't just make you compliant.
There was something you said in there where like there's all of a sudden the scarcity of data. Like we're in some ways feel like we're data poor. What that has, at least for us, forced us to do is be creative and maybe think a little bit outside the box, or at least deeper into the organizations that, we're supporting, in terms of like, we have to go looking for the data that we need. And in a lot of cases, as you go look for the data, you're finding better data,
Right.
right? You're finding data that tells you the actual value of that lead that we drove with that campaign, with that creative. And we've also taken great pains and spent a lot of energy making sure that we're instrumenting our analytics in a way that's, being enabling us to tie outcomes to everything from the platforms to the creative to the keyword and all of that. But we're having to, in our own data warehouse, we're bringing in first party data. We're bringing in CRM data from Salesforce. We are collecting all the data from the marketing platforms, the ad platforms, and we're bringing that all together. We're putting it in our own compliant data warehouse.
Mhm.
We're normalizing it. We're putting it all together, and then we're layering on our analytics and BI and visualization on top of that, and then applying our skills as advertisers to be able to understand, okay, this is working, this is not. More of this, less of that.
Right.
It's creating phenomenal outcomes for our clients and creating an environment in which we're being trusted with more data, which gives us higher fidelity and a greater ability to drive better outcomes. And then with that comes more budgets and, more territory and all of that. And it's coming from the discipline around taking control of the data that we're collecting, where we're putting it, how we're organizing it, who we're sharing it with, and making sure that we're sharing it in a compliant way, but also not relying on those third parties to basically tell us what to do, right? We can figure that out on our own.
So the foundational guide is available under the Insights tab on our website. What comes next?
Yeah, the next guide that we're releasing is consent management platforms, and that'll be coming out very soon. And then after that is cloud infrastructure. We're hoping to release these ultimate guides, basically all of them by the end of this year, right? And so,
Which is ambitious,
because
these are not
they're
small
not small
documents.
guides. They're not small guides, but we have done the vast majority of the research already. So we have researched every category. We have researched every vendor, conducted interviews, at least internally, on all the categories. We have interviews yet to go with outside experts as well as with vendors. This will be a little bit of an organic process in terms of, we'll be updating these guides as we learn more, as we interview more people, as things change, as platforms start to evolve and perhaps address some of the shortcomings in the approach that we have to take today, which is cobble all of these together. So there are some very interesting things that are happening right now with some platforms that are kind of piecing it all together. And so that'll come out as well as we talk more about each category. And, there are platforms that do show up in several categories. They are addressing several aspects of the stack all at once. And
some of them well, some of them not well.
Yeah. So there's all of that. And so we hope to be sharing our point of view on all of that over the next few months.
All right. So people should find this on wheelhousedmg.com under Insights. Foundational guide is published. The consent management, the ultimate guide, will be published shortly.
Yep.
And the other 11 will follow shortly thereafter.
And if you want to see these as they come out, go to our website and sign up for alerts for when each of them are released.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.